So I am officially going to open the meeting. My name is Ben Devanzo, and I am the chair of the Crystal and Pentagon City Council. And I'm going to read some prepared remarks before we get into our agenda. So welcome to the September 30th, 2025 Crystal and Pentagon Cities Council meeting. Tonight we are holding a hybrid public meeting which enables remote electronic participation as legally authorized by the Code of Virginia per the Planning Commission's electronic meeting policy adopted on July 7th, 2022. Members of the CPCC are participating both here and here in person and virtually through electronic means, I believe. I at least see one member electronically. This meeting is being recorded for our public records and will be posted on the Arlington County Commission's meetings YouTube page. So avoid sharing any personal information that you would not like to be made public. At this time, I'd like to orient everyone to our hybrid environment and cover a few specifics about how tonight's meeting will run. Members of the public may attend the meeting here in person or electronically by using the Microsoft Teams link provided on the CPCC webpage, the county's event calendar, and the Gov Delivery email notification sent to CPCC email subscribers. Additionally, there's a dial-in phone option for those who wish to use it. For our CPCC members joining virtually, if anyone loses internet connection during today's meeting, please reconnect with us by phone. Please keep your phones and devices muted until you are called upon. Turn off sound to any other devices around you to minimize interference. For virtual attendees using Microsoft Teams, please turn off your video feed. I will address when it is appropriate to turn it on in a moment. The Microsoft Teams meeting chat is active to serve two purposes: to assist participants who need technical support and for participants to pose brief clarifying questions to a larger audience. While the clarifying questions will be monitored, they will not be formally acknowledged. Staff may address these comments as appropriate. The Teams chat should not be used for discussion or inappropriate statements. Those who are planning to provide public comment may do so only at the end of the meeting, as the chat may not be used for this purpose. All public comments must be shared verbally for the record during the assigned public testimony periods. Note, I would like to remind everyone in the room to speak up slowly and clearly and point to the microphone to allow virtual participants to hear you. There's a button on the microphone with a little person with like noise waves coming out. That is the button to turn your microphone on and off. Additional notes for CPCC members. If CPCC members participating virtually wish to be recognized to speak on an item during the course of the meeting, please turn your video feed on and raise the virtual hand in Teams, and I, as well as staff, will monitor the video feeds. Do we have any CPCC members who joined us via phone today without the video option? I don't think there's anyone joined via phone. Additional notes for members of the public who would like to provide feedback and comment. So the CPCC agenda items are not public hearings, and therefore public comment is at the chair's discretion. We have reserved time at the end of today's agenda for public comment. I will call for speakers at the end of the meeting after the committee discussion has concluded. Members of the public attending virtually will speak first, interchanging with in-person attendees with the time remaining. The speaking time allotted per person will depend on the number of speakers we have this evening. In-person attendees, please add your name to the speaker list on the table. Virtual attendees, please indicate in the chat if you'd like to provide comment, and your name will be added to our list of speakers. Ms. Smith will acknowledge your request to the Teams chat. When virtual attendees are called to speak, you must unmute yourselves by clicking on the microphone icon that is located on your meeting command bar. The moderator does not have the ability to unmute you. You will be muted when your time has concluded. As an alternative, written public comment may also be provided to staff in paper copy or electronically. Lastly, this is a public forum. Today's meeting will be recorded and posted to the county website. All information associated with today's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to Freedom of Information Act requirements. Didn't take too long. So that brings us to our agenda, and we have the public comment form here for any of our audience members that would like to comment or those who may arrive later. So we let's see, I think our next step is to establish quorum for those who are participating in person and virtually. I would like us to please go around the table, starting in person, and then we will move to CPCC members who are attending virtually. And I will also say we can go around this way, and I also start by thanking Jennifer, who has stepped in with the departure of Matt Matuzik as they hire someone, Jennifer, who is going well beyond her job description and helping to support us at the CPCC. So it is very much appreciated, including all the remarks that I just made. So thank you, Jennifer.
Thanks, Ben. Jennifer Smith, Comprehensive Planning, and glad to be here with you tonight. And thanks, Ben, for reading through the protocols.
Thank you, Ben. Good evening, everyone. Anthony Fusarelli with the Planning Division.
Matt Ginnivan, JBG Smith.
Robert Vaughn with Dweck Properties.
Stacy Myers, Aurora Highlands.
Gary Sinners representing the Park and Rec Commission.
Susan English, Arlington Ridge Civic Association.
Meg Flores, Transportation Commission.
Wes Mayer, Simon Property Group.
Rich Kelly, Arlington Ridge Civic Association.
Jeffrey Williams, Arlington Ridge Civic Association.
Van Hine, Aurora Highlands Civic Association.
Judy Freshman, Crystal City Civic Association.
Rob Mandel with the National Landing Bid.
And Takis Carantones, Columbia Heights. I'm not part of this, but I'm a member of the county board, so therefore.
Yes. All right. And if you could please check to make sure your mic is off when you are not speaking, that would be appreciated. So we have a very packed agenda today. Oh, thank you. We have one member. If there are any other members, I don't think there are on virtual, please turn your cameras on. Okay, two. So Carol and Tommy, please introduce yourselves.
Right. Carol Fuller, Crystal City Civic Association. I apologize for being virtual. The change of date conflicts with a mandatory meeting I have at 7 o'clock, so I will drop off right at 7.
And Tom, yep.
Good afternoon. Tommy Amal. I work with the National Association for College Admission Counseling over in Clarendon, and I represent the Arlington Economic Development Commission.
Thank you, Tommy. And I will also apologize again for the change of date. I unfortunately had work travel, and the consensus was that we should change it. I had offered for it to continue, but I have definitely heard, from folks that there's a desire for a consistent day meeting time, and so I think we already have our December date scheduled, but certainly we will keep that in mind and try to pick the best days possible, looking to the 2026 schedule when we start putting that together. So on our agenda, we have 3 pretty substantial items and then a couple of other things depending on how much, one thing we have to get to and then another thing that will depend on how much time we have left. So first is our annual visit by a county board member, Matt DeFrenti, who has been the CPCC liaison from the board, is now on parental leave and has a baby successfully. So our previous liaison and county board chair, Takis, is here to talk with us and liaise about Crystal and Pentagon cities and the sector plans. Then we will discuss the River House neighborhood proposal, a adaptive reuse proposal for 2 buildings along Bell Street that have been proposed by JBG. River House is also JBG. Then we will have a sort of formal requirement to have the electronic meetings policy update. And then I will at least preview a potential coming agenda item. I don't know if we'll have time to get to it, about CPCC decision-making and communications practices before we get to public comment. I'll remind our members, there's a lot of heavy, intense topics going on this agendas. I'll remind folks to remember the charge of the CPCC, which is really to focus on the implementation and oversight of Crystal and Pentagon City sector plans and the goals and specifics, and the outlines are very different plans in different ways. But really, that is our charge from the county board, and our ultimate responsibility is to provide the county board with a sense of direction and information regarding how projects and other kind of attributes of those plans are moving forward. So I request, and I will remind folks if we get off topic, to keep our conversations within the charges and boundaries of the sector plans and the CPCC. So with that, I will turn it over to Takas, who will provide some opening remarks. And then I think how we will do it is maybe do a go round of questions rather than a free for all. So we'll do maybe the opposite direction of something like that we went in for introduction. So Rob, that means we'd be starting with you for questions and go around and then see where we end up.
Thank you. I want to apologize in advance because I have a time limitation, so I will try to be very brief at the very beginning so that we can have a dialogue here. That's number one. Number two, I don't know if we have federal employees among us tonight, or if they are online. I want to tell them that nobody in Arlington County government can sleep because of what is probably expected in the next few hours, and that we have their back, and that we are observing very closely what is happening right now. So on today's meeting, first of all, I have to ask to thank you all for having been substantial and prolific in providing input to the county board as we see this shift of the slow evolution of how the housing market, how the entire sector is evolving. We had last county board meeting, we approved two adaptive reuse projects, 2100 and 2200 Crystal Drive. And I think this drove home for everybody in Arlington that adaptive reuse is now viable under the current conditions, and it's also productive. To give you an idea, because I made a little addition, we have two approved projects. These are 675,000 square feet, about the residential units that were created in Crystal Drive are about 299. And then in addition to that, 344 hotel units. So this is business and residential. There are another three projects pending approval. These are a total of 860,000 square feet and about 610 residential units. So all in all, with just what is in the hopper right now, we have about 900 residential units and 344 hotel units. So it is very logical that during the summer you have begun to send us emails, some very well articulated. And Ms. Fuller, I have to really recognize you were the first one, Crystal City Library, a dream long denied. So that you made the case for, okay, what's happening now with the sector plan, the goals of the sector plan. If it's logical that you say, okay, wait a minute, the principal instrument that we had was additional density. So if we don't get enough additional density, can we achieve the goals of the plan? Should we recalibrate? Should we change, etc.? My temporary, and I say that deliberately, my temporary response to that is, no, we should at this point really observe very closely what is happening. But we should prepare with options about, what may happen if we continue not to get the projects that we expected. And we have reasons to believe that we will have more bumps down the road. For example, 23rd Street here. The folks from JBG, these were two towers. About 1,000 units or 1,400 units, right? So this is a significant delay in delivery and significant delay in delivery of additional value. That doesn't mean that value is not realized. Probably what you have built already is realizing this value. So it's not like the plan is not working. It's just the timelines that we have on this plan are different right now, and also the conditions around that. 1800 in 1901. Where the Cinetic Theater was. So this, I didn't like that we lost Cinetic without, while we had the building still, and it could still be operated. And I haven't seen yet a realistic plan of what happens with this space right now. It is not great that we didn't get the library when we wanted, or instead we got $6 million that are still, deposited to produce or to help to produce a local library branch. But I really think, and I think that it was here when we had this conversation about a year ago, or maybe a little bit more than a year ago, where I said I am a very big believer that part of the success story of Crystal City, Pentagon City of National Landing is a very careful recalibration post-plan. A plan is 15 years old, so it has an age. A post-calibration of the civic assets that this plan will have to deliver. Personally, I sat down with the county manager and we challenge our staff when they have a free moment for other things to look at what are the potential alternatives. We work with stakeholders, etc. The critical takeaway for you right now is remain engaged in that. Come up with. Make sure that we see the demand. Crystal City has grown since the 2000s. Amazingly, I think it's triple digit, 100 and something, 130%, or over 100% in population, in jobs, in economic density and activity. We're talking about innovation districts. We are talking new businesses are coming in. This is a place where we are. That demands from us active following and calibration based on the times we are. Therefore, I will reiterate many times that it's very important to keep the dialogue going. Now, specifics. We are very early in the implementation of an adaptive reuse policy here to calibrate whether, what exactly the additional value that we are actually unlocking here. We're not adding the value, but we are unlocking the value didn't exist before. Now there is some, right? A very good example, in my opinion, is 1570 Crystal Drive, an amazing building. This is also adaptive reuse building, right? Commercial in this case. So is there a part of this value that we should think how to sequester, how to re-guide or reconnect with community needs in the sense of the goals of in the direction of the goals of the plan? My answer is yes, we should be thinking about that. Should we, for example, say we put from the tax property tax receipts of all this building? Should we, the government, sequester some parts to reinvest here in certain parts? These are questions that are, to me, significant. It's good to think about that, and there will be fora and moments where we will have to literally focus on feasibility. Example, this coming year, 26, we will have the update of our CIP, of the Capital Improvement Plan. We had some deliverables here, and so we need to make a more adapted and updated statement about how we do that. I don't have a magic proposal for that, but I know that we have options. One of the amazing parts of living in a successful sector here is that actually produces options. We do have options. It's not like we don't. They're not always timed like we want. They're not always exactly as we envisioned them 10 or 5 or 15 years ago, but they are pretty much in the same direction. What I generally see, and from my engagement with the communities here, with the business community, et cetera, is that this is a success story for Arlington. This is an amazingly productive place. People like to live in National Landing, both Crystal City and Pentagon City. I remember very well where the livability 222-202 has started, and what the long list of issues was. I do see that piece after piece we see answers to these. They are not always ideal. I mean, it's absolutely clear to me that entertainment, for example, is absent. This is something that's missing right now, right? In the mix of commercial uses here. And taking Cinetic out didn't help. But other elements are really very well, very, very productive. Look at the new green spaces and the general civic feeling. The Crystal Drive right now is one of the best functioning roads in Arlington by far. Anyway, I don't want to hog the conversation anymore. I would love to take questions because I have barely about 15 minutes. And I think.
All right. Well, I realized I said we'd go in reverse order from introductions, which means not Rob. Folks online actually get first stab. So although I didn't say it, but I might guess that Carol might have a question if you are so prepared. But if not, we can go forward because I didn't put it that way. But do any of our online folks want to start with a question? Yes. So I see Carol going off camera, and then go ahead.
Does it have to be a question? Because since I have to leave, I won't be able to talk about the adaptive reuse, and Takis has brought that up. I just wanted to emphasize the fact that, as what he had said, that this group is supposed to be still focusing on the Crystal City sector plan in addition to Pentagon City. And what we see at this point is that the adaptive reuse proposal that is being put forward by JBG would undermine the sector because there is not any emphasis on the cultural aspects. And I would urge this group to consider that in particular, because we don't have a library, we don't have any theaters, and those were supposed to be there. We're also not getting the expansion of the Center Park because 1901 is not being taken down. So I just emphasize this group to think about, we're losing community benefits that have been approved. We're losing benefits that we were asked for in the Crystal City sector plan. So those are my comments. I just wanted to make sure before I left that I could support what Takis is saying. I think it's very important for this group to weigh in strongly on making sure that the sector plan is being followed.
Thank you, Carl. Just a reaction to that. Because I was also mentally preparing for coming here today, I walked again the places that I've seen transformed. So between the two towers, for example, and what would have been or will be the access to the park. That's a little bit So there is definitely missing a park. There is a serious. This is a serious underperformance, compared to what we planned. But what we planned was not just a central park. It was a cadence, a sequence of smaller parks, a very big one, a 75,000 square feet one, etc. So these are not canceled. These are still there, and there are the basic urban elements of that are still designed or are still up for grabs and to be designed. And we can focus when we talk about how we deliver in the sector plan, there is a balance between quality and quantity. Sometimes we may not achieve the quantity, like the size or the expanse, but we may achieve excellent quality. We learned something in Met Park about the balance between quality and quantity. Met Park is a relatively small park. However, it's performing absolutely, amazingly good. Water Park, for example, is another example where, we wanted to do something like the, more commercial with the first gastro park. Now we see that this also has limitations. So we are beginning to calibrate about what works and what works mostly with people. So this should inform the way we approach public benefits here. And yeah, this modifies a little bit how we see the deliverables of the plan.
Can I ask if you have a question for Takis, just so we can time things well, if you could raise your hand. We'll still go in the order that I said. Let's see, 1, 2, 3 questions, or 4 or 5. All right. Yeah, I don't think we're limiting it to, Carol made a comment, so we're not going to limit. Just so keep in mind what we have 10, 15 minutes. So two-ish minutes per question and response to make sure, Takis, you can get to your next engagement in time.
Go ahead. Okay, thanks, Takis. First of all, I just want to recognize the leadership that the county board had taken in developing the adaptive reuse policy. I think it's a pivotal moment. And as you said, Arlington County is a national model. We just had people from all over the country here in DC from the IDA, International Downtown Association. And we were a very popular tour, partly because of the work that's happened here in National Landing. And the adaptive reuse was a hot topic in that effort. Also, don't want to gloss over the vast investment that has gone into the neighborhood over the last 15 years around transportation and open space. Those things have been tremendously beneficial to the community and in keeping with many of the goals of the sector plan. I hope that spirit of creativity continues, and this is where my question kind of falls in. We have very expensive infrastructure on the table. Many of the things that Carol just mentioned, theater, park, library, these things cannot be delivered without the extraordinary bonus density that was to be delivered by these projects. That begs the question of how do we fund these things? And we do have a pretty useful tool in our toolbox, the tax increment financing mechanism. However, it is kind of self-inflicted, weakened because it is not leveraged. Every major municipality around the country will leverage its tax increment financing to deliver projects, to fund projects that have a demonstrable ability to add value to the tax rolls. So you don't just do it for, willy-nilly projects. They have to have a demonstrable value. I think open space is one of those ones that it certainly does. And I would argue that the arts and culture do as well. So just wanted to ask if there's been some thought of how we can leverage or harness the power of tax increment financing more strategically.
Thank you. Very briefly, I haven't discussed that with my colleagues too much, and also I haven't discussed it with staff, but definitely in my mind and in conversations I had with, and I continue to have, also with developers and others, the role of the TIF, which involves leveraging, because we want to get the maximum bang for the buck today with the bucks that we have, right? So plays a role. So of course, if I don't have the additional density, but yet I can have additional value, which will manifest itself in higher revenues for the tax for the TIF. So that's for me something to leverage. I have to add something to that. There are other things that are continue to happen around us. For example, the VRE station and the multimodal transportation hub, the fact that Amtrak will be stopping here, even if Amtrak has some, digestion problems right now, and, who doesn't, etc. Connecting the airport actually effectively with Crystal Drive through CC to DCA. The fact that we are still we do have a plan. We are going forward with changes on Route 1. So that will be unlocking value as well. It is a timing discussion right now. So that's just saying that. But I think a lot about the TIF, yes, especially when it comes to funding a library or providing public facilities.
I basically support Carol's comments about adaptive reuse, but it goes into community benefits too. And, we've all met on this topic fairly recently. I appreciate that adaptive reuse is good both for the owners and the county in terms of cost. And certainly we need more housing units. What we need is affordable units. And so I'm hoping that maybe since you're not developing buildings from scratch, that the costs are less and maybe the rents can be commensurately less. And one of the things about adaptive use that concern us, apart from the fast tracking, which really doesn't give the community much opportunity at all for input, is that you don't have an opportunity to take advantage of improvements that have come over the years in developments. For example, pick up and drop off. And on Crystal Drive, you might be able to get away with not having it for the residential, but you definitely need it for the office. And there is no way. Crystal Drive is already a mess. You can't add that. So I think that that's something to think about. And as Anthony will know, back in the day when he was staffing Crystal City, we've had an ongoing debate with the county about the definition of community benefits. A lot of what developers have to pay are what the community considers county issues, infrastructure issues, and that kind of stuff. And so then we work on getting Center Park, and as she said, Center Park will stay half a park indefinitely because of adaptive reuse. And we don't have a way of really tracking all these community benefits year over year over year. Where's the money that was donated for that park? And where are other things? We do have money from the library, for the library, not enough probably to do the library. So I think in terms of the community input, there's a lot less opportunity, both in timing and in even tracking. Maybe there were community benefits associated with the building, which is now going to be adapted. Where are those? And we have worked with the county auditor on some community benefits issues too. So I think that it's a great opportunity in the near term. I'm hoping that because it's not new construction, maybe the cost will be better for those of us for whom affordability is a ginormous issue.
Yeah, affordability is a ginormous issue for everybody in Arlington. This is one of our biggest problems. I mean, hands down. What I want to say is that community benefits are defined as payments or provisions of value that mitigate impact. A new construction has obviously impact. Additional density has obviously impact. So they balance that out by providing community benefits. We are working on a way to make it as transparent as possible, to follow the different site plans and how these community benefits are provided, etc. There is even an audit going on right now that we ask so that we learn a little bit how better to present that. However, especially with adaptive reuse, the biggest, by far, by orders of magnitude, the community benefit is the very fact that these buildings are not obsolete and are now going to be inhabited by people, etc. And I do agree in my gut and in my head that we probably, when we see a repetition of these, which is a welcome thing at this point, we should find a better way to involve community, just to inform it better, to make the process more transparent and understand. Yes, it's not impact because the building is already there, but it's additional value that is coming in the community. So this has also consequences. Small businesses are very interested in that. you said you pick up and drop off. That is a small business issue.
Yeah.
So among other things, traffic things. So I agree with you on that. It's new. So this is why I say wait and see where we go. We are at a good clip right now. I mean, 2 + 3 is five projects in a year. I mean, nothing to look, this looks good at this point. Thank you.
Hi, Takas, thank you very much for your comments and your presentation. And I agree with Carol and Judy's comments. And do you have any hints on how we can ensure that the parks and the library that we need can happen? Should we make sure they're in the CIP or the TIF? How do we go forward with that? And then you mentioned Route 1. So if you had a word about Route 1, I would like to hear it.
I don't have news on Route 1, but I know that's not that. Yes, CIP is the place, but I want to engage earlier with that to find realistic works that are based on feasibility here. I mean, that we can see them, because from 22202 livability, I know that things are missing. It's not like it's the impacts of new, it's that the old was built without impact mitigation. So this is kind of a pent up, but the legal frame for that doesn't allow us to go back and retroactively, so this is why the taxpayer jumps in and CIP works. But we have value that we can use that's deposited in the TIF and can be leveraged, and so can be accelerated. So unfortunately, I have to go, but I will take another one.
All right, maybe we can have you both ask your questions, all three of you ask your questions simultaneously. Or, no, okay. All right, Stacey and Alexander, ask both of your questions then together. So Alexander first, I think.
Okay, my question is just, particularly as you're seeing, Crystal City change and the density increasing drastically from maybe the last 15 years, I worry there may be too much of a focus on maybe visible infrastructure, maybe as opposed to things that, might be, things that are less seen. I think as, a resident here, things like the 42 and 43, bus links between North and South Arlington, where, a lot of times they lack weekend service, late night service. When you think of the image of Crystal City being what it used to be, a contractor town where people would leave at 5 o'clock, that's changed when you have a residential community really developing here. So, as you see more people, moving to a community and, you think like, hundreds of people being along what would be like a 2-lane road as Crystal Drive, is there the frequent service that might ensure that you don't have significant traffic jams, throughout the course of a day? When you look at bus service, rail service, are there alternatives for people to ensure that, you don't have that transportation gap when a community is kind of changing faster than the infrastructure can support?
Yeah, there are 3 types of infrastructure.
Can we have Stacey ask her question
yeah.
as well, and then you could answer both of them? Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, how you doing? My question sort of builds on some of the other comments that Rob and Judy and Carol had. It seems to me that one way to leverage the TIF would be to take money that is available now, a small amount of money, and use that to start planning, as you were just describing, Takas, for the future. So, our CPCC report from 2024 had a nice list in it. Livability has a nice list in it. There's lots of people that have input for what needs to happen here. Why can't we get something like that going and prioritize things so that when the money is available for a TIF and leverage, that we'll be ready to hit the ground rolling? We'd also like to get a response from Aurora Highlands. I would like to get a response to the CPCC report. We'd asked, was it Matt, to get us something, but nobody ever responded to that. So I'd like to see that, a response to that.
I will look at the last one, but because I'm not aware, I have most. So on infrastructure, there are 3 elements that I think are super important. Number 1 is transportation assets and how the networks work. I think of towns as networks. basically. So you're up. I hear you 1,000%. But in order to manifest the demand for that, frequencies, alternate redundancies and all this, you have to check other boxes. For example, cultural assets. If you don't have entertainment in place, your businesses, I mean, they aren't anchored in things. We lack this completeness in our system right now. This is why the BID is working on that. This is why new businesses are coming in. It is amazing to observe how Amazon has actually changed the small business environment around here, and with that, how it changed the accessibility, walkability, and social environment of the place. Together with the third one, which is the green stuff, the public space, open and public space. So these interwoven things are quality of life issues that I agree with you that we have to keep them in mind. When I say recalibrate, I literally mean, housing, transportation, culture, green capital, entertainment, and economic development, these things. So I hear you on this. I wish I would have more time to elaborate deeper, but I'm happy to come back and I'm open at any time. On when to start with that, I think that in this group here has an amazing background and a tradition of thinking ahead and being very organized in that, which is the livability 2202 thing. I think this is completely response to how the urban environment has matured. We are partners in that. We'll figure out when and how and what kind of staff resources we could need for that. But at this point, I think we should see what is in front of us and how it evolves, because with 5, I'm happy to see 5 adaptive reuse projects, but at the same time, I have also other things that are not working right now. So I'm in a balance of let's see how it works, but being very ready. I agree with that. And on TIF, I have to do more thinking and policy work. So I unfortunately have to leave. I'm already too late.
Thank you so much, Takis, for joining. I guess
And I really apologize for having to.
Vice Chairs Robert and myself will sacrifice our chance to ask questions and comments, but that's totally okay. We will find future opportunities to engage with you. So we appreciate. No. This is exactly the time we had scheduled for it. Yes. No, thank you so much. And we are now have to move on to our next agenda item anyway. All right. So we are going to now discuss the River House neighborhood process, or project rather. We've for reference, we've devoted about 30 minutes or so for this topic. I will say a couple of contextual remarks. This has been I've been following the River House neighborhood. It has been, I think, about a year of SPRCs, if I understand right. And 5 of them, which is a lot, but also it's a very big project. I know I had advocated for a robust review process and to have a PDSP and everything like that during the sector plan review. So it is good that there has been a lot of discussion. If I understand right, this is a review of not just 3 different kind of things that the county is considering adopting. A phase development site plan, for those of you who don't know, it is sort of like a smaller version of the sector plan for a specific block is maybe the best way to describe it. It shows where buildings will be, where parks or roads, things like that, but doesn't actually approve construction or moving forward with any particular buildings. And then what is also being approved, or the county board is being asked to approve or consider, is a 4.1 approval of a certain number of buildings, townhouses, and a couple of multifamily buildings, as well as the associated zoning changes. And you all can correct me if I got that wrong. There is a robust process to consider this. There was a CPCC member, Jeff, who represented us on that project. Of those 5 site plan review committee meetings, there will be additional hearings on this from the Planning Commission, Transportation Commission, Parks and Rec Commission, et cetera, as well as, of course, the county board. Our role in this process is really to provide insight and advice to the county board about the alignment of this project with the sector plan. And so I've asked that the presentations and our kind of discussion be really focused on, what is in alignment, what's out of alignment, both with kind of the overall goals and values of the Pentagon City Sector Plan, and with the specifics of what it says should be adopted on the River House site. I'll say this is exciting. I believe this is the first official project really to be adopted under the Pentagon City Sector Plan. Met Park doesn't really count because it was technically adopted as part of it, but it was pre-planned before it. So that process that many of us went through 3 or 4 years ago is now leading to the culmination of this is the real project coming under it. And so this is our chance to see how the sector plan is coming to fruition, and keep in mind things that worked in that, things that may have not worked. Things change over time, even if it's just a couple of years, as we down the road see potentially additional future projects come in under the sector plan. So how I think we're going to stagger this is we've asked JBG to put together a short presentation of especially the key elements related to the sector plan. Then Jeff, can I turn it to you just to give a brief summary? You'd sent out a review of your kind of experience as the SPRC member, but a brief summary, and then we're going to turn it over to Anthony for a quick presentation for the county before opening it up to discussion. Where I'd like us to be able to land is to provide us with enough, right? We don't need to have consensus, but at least direction, so that we can have potentially a letter, or at least the ability that I can give comment to the county board when they consider this in theory sometime this fall about how the CPCC views this project. So I will first turn it over to Matt with JBG.
So thank you, Ben. And yes, it has been a robust process. As I know folks who participated in the process know, in addition to the year-long SPRC process, we had an LRPC process before that, obviously that coming on the heels of the sector plan process before that. So I won't go into all that history, but will just sort of give a brief summary of where the plan sits today. For those of you who aren't familiar with River House, 3 towers, 1,676 units. They were built by the Capritz family in the early 1960s before Metro was built. So they were built with a lot of surface parking. For those 1,676 units, there's over 1,800 parking spaces there today. Less than 1,200 of those are utilized. So obviously the big opportunity was to look at those surface parking lots and turn those into housing with replacement parking phased in over time below grade under those new buildings. This is just a aerial image of the existing conditions today, and you can see sort of how much of the site really is utilized for surface parking today. And then, as Ben noted, the application that we're bringing forward to the county board has 2 components: the 4.1 final site plan, which are the projects which we anticipate moving forward in the near term, and then a broader PDSP, which provides the overarching guidance for the site for projects that will come forward in future phases. And as Ben alluded to, we are looking at trying to accommodate a mix of housing types on the site. To the southern end of the site, as we abut the Aurora Highlands and Arlington Ridge Civic Association neighborhoods, that's where we've planned for sale product, townhomes, and 2/2 townhome style condominiums. That's Land Bay S. There's 100, and I can cheat right here. There are 132 units there. And then as you move to the north, C1, which is also part of our 4.1 site plan, that's a roughly 100 unit sort of neighborhood scale multifamily building, transitioning the height up to the existing Ashley. And then I'll skip over C2 and C3 because those are parts of the PDSP. N1 is the other 500 unit multifamily building that we are bringing forward in a 4.1 site plan. Excitingly with that, project, we have been in discussions with VHC to open up a new urgent plus emergency care facility, which really is intended to provide sort of all the services that you could find at the main campus, just short of any life-threatening issues. So there'll be no ambulances that come here, but if you go in with a condition that turns out to be life-threatening, an ambulance might take you away to the main campus. So that's something we're really excited about to bring with that. But then you can see in the future, we have these footprints outlined for where future buildings can come in over time. And I think the next page is, oh yeah, and then also really critically, making sure that we're bringing on the open space network with those phases. The green ribbon being a really key circulation, both for River House itself, but then obviously connecting to the broader neighborhood. And then these new open spaces that will be, both for the residents here, but also they'll be public and open to all the folks in the broader neighborhood. This is that full network at full build out. And then I think helpful too, just seeing these in 3 dimension. These are those 3 4.1 phases. Again, you can see Lambay, the townhomes on the southern end to the left of the page, and then the 2 multifamily buildings. And then here you can see the higher rise buildings in the future phases. And some renderings of the architecture as they integrate with the existing buildings.
Thank you. So if I could turn it to you, Jeff, to just provide a brief overview of the general topics and themes that came up during the SPRCs.
Yeah, okay. So as we said, the SPRCs and LRPCs have been going on for quite a while. The LRPCs took place from September to November 2023. So they started quite a while ago. There was a kickoff that was held at the Longbridge Aquatic Center where JBG presented their initial plans for the site. There was walking tours, and there were a series of LRPC meetings. At the end of those meetings, there was a report that came back from the staff that noted numerous conflicts with the sector plan, including the public realm and public spaces, building locations, tree canopy, bike network, and facade lengths. We had a kind of a brief period. There was a hiatus, and then the SPRC started in October 2024. And I believe there were some changes that were made as a result of the LRPC. I think they increased some of the spaces between the 2 north buildings, but they were still less than what the sector plan envisioned. And there was discussion about the widths of the buildings in the center parcel as well. That's the primary green ribbon route. There was concerns about the view from Virginia Highlands Park to the ridge, as well as being able to separate bicycle and pedestrian pathways down through that green ribbon segment. It was quite a lively discussion at that first SPRC. Then we basically kind of went quiet for a while, and then at SPRC 2, JBG came back with a materially revised phase development plan. They incorporated a lot of the feedback that they received, and it resulted in the building placements and public space alignments that you see. In my report, I could call out the changes. In the North Land Bay, there were some build-to zone adjustments. There was alignment of the public space with the West Post Plaza. The full 1 acre public space was created. The N2 building height went up. I should drop back. One of the things that came out in the discussion at the SPRC1 from a number of folks was that the Pentagon City Sector Plan allowed for and called out for taller buildings in the northern part of the parcel, tapering down to lower profile buildings as it got closer to the single family neighborhoods. And JBG elected mostly to put in 7-story buildings, which resulted in pretty large footprints in their initial proposal. And that is really what kind of I think, helped kind of drove the squeezing of the public open spaces. At least that's my interpretation of it. So the discussion kind of went to the fact that a lot of the bonus density that was envisioned by having these taller allowable buildings wasn't going to be realized. And the concern is that expressed was that the committed affordable was on the bonus above the base density. And so as a result, by not going up, we were going to lose the ability to maybe generate more committed affordable units. I realize there are trade-offs on other costs, but that was one of the discussion items I think that went into reevaluating. In the Center Bay, JBG removed an O condominium building that was obstructing the view. The primary green ribbon space between the two C buildings was expanded. They added height and density to the C2 and C3 buildings. The new M3 building was framed the street more appropriately, and it gave better building height variation. The revised green ribbon design maintained a clear linear path and a visual line of sight to the ridge. And the final SPRCs, they revised the connection up to the 15th Street by putting in refuge and seating areas that leads up from Kent Street to 15th. In the Southland Bay, they made changes to the Kent Street alignment. They made changes to the townhouse alignment and circulation. And then there was a pedestrian issue regarding the 15th Road connection into there, where we had drives and garages that turned off of that road that presented a hazard to pedestrians. So they worked, and revised plan has rear-loaded townhouses on 15th, which means that the green ribbon segment on that section is much safer for pedestrians. And then a bike lane was added. And I think that kind of summarizes most of the changes. During the meetings, there are some community members who showed up, expressed concern that many preferred lower buildings so that would maintain the view sheds from their units, folks on the ridge. There was concern about the higher density, mostly around traffic concerns and impacts on public services. Some folks were concerned about the noise impacts from the HVACs on N1. Those are the major ones that I remember hearing. Overall, what I would say is that the current site plan and PSP have evolved significantly over the course of this public process, and that the current plan accords much, much more closely to the Pentagon City Sector Plan guidelines than the initial proposal.
Thanks so much, Jeff. So if we could turn it over to the county to share just their kind of analysis with the alignment.
Great. Thank you, Ben. And given, I think, both Matt's highlights of the proposal as well as Jeffrey's excellent, I think, summary of the really robust community engagement process, I believe 3 long-range planning committee meetings in addition to 5 site plan review committee meetings. This is a proposal for a large property. It has had, I think, a appropriately sized process. And I think as Jeffrey's report noted, this process, I think, exhibits one where there were a lot of changes made based on the input that was received. And certainly all the input from the SPRC is not, there's not consensus. And so where we stand today, given that SPRC did conclude in late July, so our staff team and the applicant have continued to work together. We provided recently our final round of technical really plan review comments, and is really working with the applicant to prepare for the final plan sets that then would be ready to present to the commissions that Ben had noted as prior to getting the county board for consideration. And so at this point, I believe, while there's no guarantee, we are currently, I think, tracking that this would be on the public hearings and boards agenda for consideration at this stage in the December timeframe. I think it's important to note that the staff review is still ongoing, and the evaluation is happening in real time. That will feed into our staff reports that show up in a draft format for the advisory commissions, and then in final form for the county board. But I think overall, and I think this echoes much of what Jeffrey's report speaks to, is the way in which the project has evolved. I think it really appears to have the potential to meet several significant goals that are set forth in the sector plan. As with any project, there's always details, and there's areas for continued refinement or just continued study. And so in this particular instance and moment, there are a few cases with the proposal, or a few details of the proposal where they're not maybe fully in full alignment with the sector plan recommendations. And that's an area that we're continuing to work on. But we will see, right, as the proposal takes its final form and is heard by the commissions and the county board, there may be areas that continue to not really find full alignment with sector plan recommendations, but all of that is taken into consideration on balance. And, ultimately, the manager's recommendation for the board will be an evaluation of all of what's really part of the proposal. So I think the last slide here just really just shows, and I think as the project has evolved through the process, the fact that there are a couple of areas limited to one slide on where there's some perceived differences in the proposal, I think says a lot for the process, the input that was provided. I know there was a lot of public engagement and community interest and participation. And so we'll look forward to continuing to ready the materials for final consideration later this year.
All right. So now I would like to open up for for a comment from the council members. If you could, we'll go ad hoc on this one. If you could indicate, you'd want to speak, we'll maybe, first person can turn the microphone on and speak. And if you'd like to speak, raise your hand, and I'll just try to keep an eye on that. And for our online folks, we can, I think, ask you, as we had said, to go on camera, and that would indicate that you would like to speak. Yeah. Robert.
Just one clarifying question. Sector plan goal for the site, I think, is 150 units per acre. Does that sound right? How close are we to that?
Do you remember where we shook out on the PDSP?
I think with a margin of error is, if memory serves, it's about 111 plus or minus units per acre. So it's not the 150 maximum that was planned per the sector plan, but it's significantly more than what was proposed with the initial proposal.
Okay, can I have a quick follow-up? In terms of the community benefits that might have been envisioned in the plan with 150 unit per acre delivery, what's lost? Like, what's given up because we haven't achieved the density that was originally envisioned in the sector plan? So I think this fits into the context of the conversation we're going to have with adaptive reuse. It's like we ask for density in our plans. For that density, we get community benefit. But if we don't get that density, we don't get community benefit. So I think it's important to continue to talk about those trade-offs when we're discussing how dense and how not dense a particular site is.
It's a great question, and the final recommendations and report that goes to the board will have the details of what is proposed and agreed to as part of this particular proposal. Taking a step back, I would say, for example, that one of the sector plan goals and recommendations on a way to achieve additional development and density that was planned is through the realization of more affordable housing, right? A certain amount of affordable housing based on sort of that net new percentage of that net new residential growth. And so if the net new residential growth is not that full 150 dwelling units per acre, right? I think one can logically get to a place where the overall affordable housing that might be provided with that proposal would be somewhat less. The details of that will become more clear, I think, as the materials, are ready and prepared for the board's consideration.
I think that's right. That probably the affordable housing's the big swing there, are the only one that's sort of really impacted by the density, because all the site improvements and the open space network, those are still all provided both in, their relative percentage in the 4.1 and in the overall PDSP. I think in the overall PDSP, we actually wind up exceeding a lot of the sector plan goals for open space, et cetera.
I'm going to ask a follow-up clarifying question, which relates to, I think these questions around, I would thank you for raising that, Rob. I would put that as a deviation from the sector plan, the units per acre not being achieved. And I think we should consider mentioning that. But can you speak a little bit more to the open space, and specifically, I think the N1 and 2 buildings and the distance between them, I know was a topic at the SPRC, and how that compares to what was envisioned between those two spaces or those two buildings in the sector plan and what we ended up with in the end.
Yeah, I think our original proposal was 65-ish, and then it grew to close to 100, and now it's exactly matching the separation in the sector plan.
Yeah, Alexander.
So the question I had was more related to the affordability of these units. For example, and I guess this is twofold, and I'll ask them together. The first thing is, for the new units that are created, how many of these, I know there are certain programs in place and that reserve, so if we're creating new buildings, and I'm assuming from the discussion of it, they seem luxury. How many of those will be reserved actually? I know that Arlington County has an affordable housing program where people who make, there are certain thresholds that you could apply. How many of those will be reserved, for people who, make under a certain threshold and will have, somewhat of a reduced rent as a result? And how much of that's going to be purely luxury where, you're able to charge market rate, as much as the market could afford. And I ask this only because, right, this is 1,600 units. And I remember when I first moved to Arlington, I remember touring River House. It's one of the few places Arlington you can get a 1-bedroom at $1,800 a month and a studio. I think now it's closer to $1,900, but I'm on the website right now and I can see, a lot of the studios that exist, right? The studios here are from 1,600, 1,700, which is, very important when you look at the affordable housing market in Arlington. And I worry about upkeep for these, for these current buildings, right? You have 1,600 units. When you're offering a luxury product and you're making quite a lot of margin on those, will you continue to provide support and upkeep, right? For 1,600 units that's, are very important to, the affordable housing market in Arlington. It's one of the few places where outside of, you don't have to apply for a lottery, you're able to just get, right, something that, is within the realm of government workers, of people who, right, might not be at the highest socioeconomic strata. And, will those current, what I would consider affordable rate, housing, options in Arlington still be available, right? If you have those luxury units, will you continue to provide upkeep?
So a couple elements to that question. One, on the existing 1,676 units, Yes, absolutely. We'll continue to invest in the upkeep of those. We've invested millions of dollars in the past 8 years that we've owned them in the upkeep of those buildings, and our go forward, 10-year CapEx plans have millions of dollars in recurring maintenance and CapEx and improvements to those buildings. They are market rate buildings. The 1,676 units, they are fully market rate, with the exception of some that I'll talk about in a second here. But I think you're right that they do occupy an important part of the overall housing market within Arlington County more broadly, but 22202 specifically, because they were built in the 60s, and so the units are larger, and then they're missing some of the sort of fancy luxuries that we take for granted now of predominantly in-unit washer dryer. That's really the key one. That if you're out there shopping now for a new apartment and you're only looking for the new apartments, you're going to expect that in your unit. We have looked in the past at the viability of adding washer dryer to the units, and it's really expensive and not really feasible. The electrical loads and plumbing loads, the buildings aren't really designed to accommodate. So they'll continue to be market rate units, but they'll continue to occupy, I think, this important part in the overall housing market of providing larger units at a relatively more affordable price. We do have in the James 42 units that are capital A, committed, affordable to individuals making 60% of area median income or less, and those are administered through Arlington's housing program. And those were units that we committed in relation to some of the high-rise buildings that we built on Crystal Drive, where we were able to offer more units in the James than we would have been able to offer in those new high-rise developments. As it relates to the new development, there's two components of the affordable housing program. There's the base affordable housing, which specifies a specific dollar contribution that you make to Arlington County's Affordable Housing Investment Fund, which the county is then able to leverage by making, I don't know the exact structure of the investments, but they're sort of secondary loans to folks like True Ground, who are building the new affordable housing units at Crystal Houses, because they're able to go and take those limited dollars from the county and use those to go obtain significant LIHTC, which is a low-income housing tax credit financing from the federal government. So you can either provide that cash contribution, or you can provide on-site units in lieu of that. And we're still working through that with the county, what the mix of us will do for that. And then the bonus percentage, as Anthony noted, is 10% of the net new, but it's not net new of all the developments. It's over and above the existing density that was on the site previously, which was 72 units per acre. And so those will predominantly come in the later phases where we are exceeding the existing density on the site.
I'm just going to throw a clarification on that. So the sector plan says 10% of on-site of units are committed affordable housing. Is that considered 10% of, do we know the interpretation? Because actually I'm realizing the sector plan is not entirely clear, of each building, of the combined, is it of the combined PDSP is the expectation? Is it combined including the existing River House buildings? Do we know how we are interpreting what 10% in terms of River House being on-site committed affordable units at 60% of area median income actually means?
Yeah, so I think to the point Matt was just speaking to, the evaluation of that, the affordable housing expectations on site, and that 10% of net new, that 10% of net new sort of comes into play once the overall density for the property exceeds that 72 dwelling units per acre threshold. And so with the proposal that's been shared tonight, you have several buildings that are part of initial final site plan phases that might be delivered sooner. It would be in later phases where that 72 units per acre threshold would be exceeded. And therefore, that's the point at which you'd start to see, we would expect to see some of those committed affordable units come along with those later phases of development.
I mean, I would push back in that the sector plan doesn't say it's above the kind of base zoning. It just says 10% of on-site committed affordable units. So maybe that's an interpretation. I know that is the traditional, right, how zoning and site plans work, that there's the base and then you get additional density. But the sector plan doesn't specify, right, whether it is above, a specific threshold compared to just 10% overall. So maybe there's additional documentation or county policy that you could share that would clarify that, because I think that's an important difference and understanding for both this site and what the understanding was when the PDSP was, or when the Pentagon City Sector, the PCSP was adopted.
We certainly have time to work on clarifying that, before any final reports are published.
Okay, I saw Judy and then Jeff.
Yeah, this is a big project. It's going to take a long time, and I don't expect to see it in my lifetime. However, Matt mentioned the affordable units from 1900 that are on this site. And I have to presume, since JVG and others are in the business of business and making money, that eventually this site, as it develops, will generate profit. And so, but we're also told, and anytime there's a building built and the affordable housing comes up, it's always, oh my God, it's so much expensive to build these units that it's better to make a contribution than have it on site. And so, since there's a precedent for converting some of your existing units to affordables, I'm wondering down the road, when all the numbers are crunched and there's a shortfall, if the answer is not in the newer units, even though that would be lovely, but probably not realistic, if the answer isn't that you come up with a number of additional units in the 3 existing buildings that can meet that contribution requirement.
Yeah, that's actually contemplated in the sector plan. And if we elect that option, you basically have to do 2x. So we would have to double that amount in the existing building. Right. Yep.
So my comment was kind of related to that, in that the requirement only kicks in once you get into the bonus density for the committed affordable. The question I had was, does that mean that that density goes into the building that crosses over that threshold, or can you put that in other words, if N1 doesn't get you to a point where you are in the bonus area, and it's the N2 building that actually gets you over the limit, you have to put those units in the N2, or what's the flexibility? And it's related to Judy's. Can you put some of those? Because I think looks like the N1 building, I think you anticipated might have 2 and 3 bedroom units in it, which might be desirable to have family-sized units as part of the committed affordable mix. So I just wanted to know where's the constraint? Can you put them can you propose them in any building in the PDSP of where those committed affordables go?
Yes, I think we can, but I think we'd be unlikely to commit them until we cross into that bonus density threshold. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Gary.
I have a couple of questions. I had submitted these to the applicant in writing earlier, and if you would prefer, instead of me taking up time here to wait for an answer, I could just wait for the answer to the email I sent. But if you have just a moment, I'll mention the 3 of them. The first one is whether the applicant would be willing to make a community benefit payment to the capital fund for Virginia Highlands Park. That park is overly loved, overly used right now, and the project will be adding several thousand people to that neighborhood, and I'm sure many of those folks will be wanting to use that park. So we would be interested in seeing if we can find some very important funds to help maintain Virginia Highlands Park for the new residents coming in, but also all the residents that currently use that park. The second question is, currently on the River House property, there are a couple of recreational things like a kid's playground, other sorts of things like that. And my question is whether in the build out, obviously most of those things will be removed during the construction process, but will any of them be added back in as you were finishing up the construction project? And then the last one is along the western border of the property, from pretty much the far northern end all the way down to the southern end. There is a large strip of land there that is on River House property that is pretty badly infested with non-native invasive plants. And we were wondering whether there are any plans as part of the construction project to address that.
Could I add when you answer Gary's questions, because I think the last one particularly relates to one of the deviations and with the townhouses encroaching kind of the 3060, if you could kind of, because I think the answers might be interrelated if I remember right.
Yeah, and I apologize, I haven't seen that email, but I'll check with our folks and make sure we get a response to that. On a additional capital contribution, I think we have an overall community benefits package that's pretty prescriptive in the sector plan. And the first phases have a really significant lift in terms of overall site infrastructure that they're providing. In particular, the Joyce Street improvements, the new cycle track on Joyce Street, the sections of the green ribbon that come with each phase, and then the open spaces, in particular the first phase of the central open space at N1 that comes with that. So happy to look at it, but I think just from an overall community benefits package right now, just what we have to do physically on the site is already a very full package relative to the unit count. On the second question, the children's play area, that will not be impacted by the first phase. That's approximately in the footprint of C2 right here, so that would remain. In terms of what comes back when we build the new permanent open spaces, we have to go through a public park master planning process, right? Which our landscape architect, Bradley Site Design, has done an engagement online, and so we'll solicit input on what amenities people want to see in those public spaces. I think we're certainly open to all those types of amenities and more. And then on the question around the invasives, were you referencing? I'm sorry, could you reference again where you were saying the invasive plants were?
The western border.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all of that comes out as part of our redevelopment, and Bradley Site Design has a full native and multi-tiered canopy plan that's included as part of our 4.1. And Ben, yes, I think to your point, there's sort of the question in the sector plan of canopy zone or canopy as a percentage, right? And in that zone there really weren't any viable native trees. The trees there are really overgrown and have died, and there's invasive planting. So we will be having buildings in that zone. We'll also be adding new native plantings that will actually add real viable and sustainable canopy in that area.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we do probably need to move on to our next item. Are there any quick, I'd say not questions, but comments folks that would want to make to influence how the CPCC considers this, particularly on the kind of two deviations that staff pointed out about the N1 building having a larger facade than required, as well as that question about this original conception that there would be a more forested area buffering between the east and west boundaries going up to the ridge, and the fact that apparently the botany there doesn't really allow at least that place to continue. Yeah, Robert.
Yeah, just want to commend staff and Matt and his team. It's been a marathon. I'm really glad I was not a part of it. I think to go through a site of this complexity and end up, as Anthony said, with deviations on 2 pages, like, is it checking all the boxes? I don't know, right? That'll be for the county board to consider. But for me, like, it's pretty good.
All right. Well, thank you. Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to turn it back over to you again, Matt. This is what we get with JPG's robust presence in our neighborhood to talk about. So I'll remind folks, right, at our last meeting, we had a pretty robust, I think it was a really good discussion about the 2 conversion projects that were approved along Crystal Drive by the county board since our last meeting. And we had a robust discussion about the real benefits of conversions, and having outdated, unused office buildings do not really bring us towards the overall goals and values of the Crystal City Sector Plan, and the conversions being really great for that. But the kind of concerns both around potential, and I think maybe in the grand scheme smaller, but still existing conflicts with the visions, some specific visions around the underground. And I'll flag for those of you who didn't see it, JBG has committed, and maybe we can be in some further conversation about the role of the CPCC and coming up with some kind of vision for the underground, I think by a certain landmark in the kind of review process for those. And is now, so this is in many ways, in my mind, a sequel, The Empire Strikes Back, to the A New Hope of conversion projects for Crystal City. So I'll turn it over to you, Matt. We'll see.
Great, thanks. So just a quick update on 2100 and 2200. Just that you see them on the slide here. So we were approved by the county board in July, and both we and our partner, who's going to be purchasing 2100 for the hotel, have really continued our design at full steam. Both of us recently completed our 100% construction documents, which have now been submitted for building permits. And, I don't have any wood here to knock on, but we're both trying to start construction by the end of the year. So it really is exciting to find a way to both sort of solve those buildings and bring forward these viable projects. And then for better or worse, we have more pipeline of vacant office buildings. And so that's the 2 that I'm talking about here tonight. Just on the block to the north, 1800 South Bell and 1901 South Bell. And Jen, would you mind just clicking forward? Oh, no worries. Yeah. And so I think I know everyone's sort of familiar with the adaptive reuse ordinance, but again, just to sort of remind ourselves why it is we're pursuing these. And for folks who are not directly in the commercial real estate industry, it is sometimes hard to overstate just how dire the state of the Washington, D.C. and Northern Virginia commercial office market is. Vacancies now are higher than they've ever been in my career, but going back even much further than that. You can go back to the 2008 financial crisis. You can go back to the dot-com bust. You can go back to the 90s. We've never had office vacancies this high for this long and still rising. And, obviously a huge part of that is the changes in how people are working post-COVID. That shrunk a lot of office demand. And you've also seen certain institutions and companies just no longer be office users. And so it's really been a sea change across the industry. But then when you talk about the DC metro area, you layer onto that the uncertainty around Doge, our apparent shutdown happening tonight, and all of those elements. And it's really been a perfect storm of all the worst things that could happen for the office market. So that's sort of the background of why Arlington County introduced this policy, which really was timely and necessary because we are facing a significant wave of these continued non-viable office buildings. So here are the 2 buildings that we're talking about tonight: 1800 South Bell and 1901 South Bell, delivered both in the late 60s. 1800 South Bell was actually 100% vacant when we had the JBG Smith formation. It was a building that we had identified as a redevelopment opportunity. We were quite fortunate that though we had Amazon as a tenant in there because they needed space fast when they chose Arlington as the home for their HQ2. But it was never intended to be a permanent home. It was always intended to be swing space until we delivered this space. So in the end of 2023, Amazon vacated that space. And well, it is, it's a built out office space, but it is from the 1960s. And right now, office tenants are able to choose, and they're choosing the best. And so we don't have net new demand for this. If we were still in an environment where the GSA was very actively leasing, this is a building that could be competitive for the GSA, but the GSA has been slashing their footprint. It's not that they've sort of held steady, they've been slashing their footprint. And that's a similar case with 1901. 1901 actually did have predominantly GSA tenancy. And if policy had been a little bit different, we might be renewing all those leases. And there wouldn't be a conversation about changing the use. We would just be extending the leases of those tenants that are in there. But all of those tenants are expected to vacate by year-end 2026. The building is currently about 30% occupied, and it'll be 0% by end of 2026. So then how can we reutilize those buildings? And I think, one of the things that's not on this page, but I think is interesting in what we found as we've laid out these older buildings to convert them into apartments, is that they are delivering not a capital A affordable unit mix, but a very different unit mix than the high-rise buildings that we're delivering. And the reason for that is when we're delivering high-rise buildings, every square foot really, really matters. Every square foot is an incremental cost to the development. And so we wind up to make the overall financing work. We wind up having to skew much more towards smaller units that result in a higher rent per foot. Because we're buying the building by per foot, we have to find rents that can meet that. When we're dealing with these adaptive reuse, we have the footage, right? The buildings exist, and it's much more about what are the units that naturally fit within them. And what we found is that larger multi-bedroom units fit much better in these with a lot less gymnastics and cost. So the unit mix in both 1800 and 1901 is currently contemplated is very similar to what we have at 2200, where the average unit size is around 1,100 square feet rentable. In our new construction high rise, the average size tends to be around 750 to 800 square feet net rentable. So it's a meaningful increase in size. Part of that is that we have no studios in these buildings, and they are skewing more towards 2 and 3 bedrooms, but it's also just more generous spacing. And again, this is really a function of reusing those existing structures, where the geometry doesn't necessarily make sense to squeeze in smaller units. And so we wind up with units that have larger bedrooms where you can fit a desk. That's really valuable for a lot of people now. Or as opposed to a stacked washer dryer in a closet, a laundry room where you can also store a Costco run. Having an extra den, something that we saw actually sort of surprising us on the lease up of the 1900 Grace and Riva assets, where we saw young couples who were either expecting or had recently had a small child, and having that extra room or a place where someone can work from home, really valuable. So I think that there's a really high demand for these. And again, it's not to say that they're capital A affordable, but they're going to allow us to retain and attract a different demographic that I think otherwise wouldn't be renting here. And then they won't have some of a rooftop pool, right? That's really expensive to add into these. And so there'll be a different amenity mix where it'll be much more about what are you getting inside of your unit rather than the amenities we're able to offer. And then I think just lastly, one of the important things about the adaptive reuse is the benefits to the overall neighborhood. These buildings right now, they are, they're drag on the rest of the neighborhood because they're not active during the day, they're not active during the night, and they're sort of, the black holes within the neighborhood that are not giving out any energy to the neighborhood. And so bringing those additional residents in will bring the customers, to our retail, additional people on the street. And so we're really excited to bring these forward.
All right, thanks. And so I'm going to turn it quickly over to Anthony for our staff presentation.
Thank you, Ben. And I think Jen, if we can probably jump ahead to the next slide, and just in the interest of time, and to limit redundancy with what Matt had covered in describing his proposal, I would just want to note, I think, a few key points, right, that actually came up in our earlier conversation, and County Board Chair Karen Tonis had noted the interest and activity that we are seeing already in terms of applications for adaptive reuse projects. 2 that were approved in July, 1 that's coming forward this month to the board in October. In addition to this application, we have, I believe, 1 other current active application in the courthouse area. All that being said, we are continuing to work on sort of right-sizing the process associated with. So I do want to acknowledge, I think, the feedback that came through in the context of the July application. And so part of what the staff team is doing right now is really trying to think more critically about how can we find avenues for additional input into the process before we get to the point of a planning commission hearing. At the same time, balancing that against not sort of reconstructing an SPRC process, which I think was acknowledged as an important part of the policy adopted last year, that time is money, and that sort of some level of certainty, or at least timeliness with action on these proposals, is important. So all that's to say, in the near future, there should be more information shared about a way to engage a meeting, et cetera, on this proposal that happens before the Planning Commission hearing. But that being said, I think the other important point to note about the policy that the board adopted last November doesn't necessarily sort of rubber stamp an adaptive reuse proposal. I think what it says to me is it makes it so that if there's a proposal to reuse a building that maybe stands in the way of achieving identified plan goals, it's not a non-starter, right? We can have the conversation around that, but we should do that sort of in a, I think, clear and transparent manner in terms of what plan goals might not be realized, at least for the foreseeable future, as these buildings are given a second life. And so as our team, works with the applicant over the next few months, we'll be doing our best to really call to light what those trade-offs might be, and where there are trade-offs, and if the board were to approve this proposal, are there mitigating actions or some augmentation that could be considered either on this site or nearby that helps sort of move the needle towards further towards plan realization. And I think I'll just end it there, and happy to take any questions.
So I just want to frame our discussion a bit, because I've thought about this a good amount, and some folks have worked a lot on it. Crystal City sent a very thoughtful and clear letter about it, where we have this kind of moment in time where we have some conflicting goals within, I think, the sector plan, where there's these broad visions for activating public spaces and fully integrated neighborhoods and a vibrant urban community. And then we have the specifics of the sector plan, where the parks are supposed to go, particularly, or entertainment districts, things like that. And we have an environment, as Matt well laid out, where the financial feasibility of getting some of those specifics, like the park, at the very least, are just not there and will not be there anytime soon. And so I think what we have to kind of consider in particular, and I think we discussed last time, is kind of these trade-offs, where you are getting, especially the bump of what a fully integrated and used residential buildings will lead to, and what that means for us now, and what it might lead to more down the road, including revenue. And Takis mentioned things like the tax increment financing. as well versus, what, 15 years ago folks thought was needed and best for that neighborhood and what the county had adopted. And especially for things like open space and entertainment options that bring together. And they aren't mutually exclusive, right? There are ways, as Anthony said, that maybe there could be additional spaces. This is not a plan that is laid in stone, and you can even see like the way that the plan envisions where the Grace and Riva will be. It's not exactly how it happened, and that's all totally fine and good. But it's all comes through kind of a conversation. So I wanted to lay out that kind of framework for folks to consider as we weigh to how to provide input to the county board on conceptualizing and considering these proposals. So I will open it up for a discussion.
I'll just share real quick. Just when discussing trade-offs, I think one of the really important elements to be part of that conversation is if, say, the community or the board decides to forego on an adaptive reuse, what then are the steps that are going to be taken to actually realize the goals you were trying to prevent from being hindered, right? Like, how will the sector plan goals be achieved by rejecting an adaptive reuse project that's proposed? I think that is a really important part of that conversation because it's an expensive, it's expensive solution. And I think it's easy to say, a reuse project might lengthen the time period that a building will be in the way of that progress. But at the same time, not doing that project doesn't get us any closer to having the mechanism, the tools, the money to achieve the sector plan at all. So.
I think I saw Susan raise her hand first and then Stacy.
So actually, I'm really supportive of the adaptive reuse because the fiscal crisis is huge, and filling the hole in the revenue bucket is also huge. But I'm going to think about what Alex said and think about some of the things Carol wants and Judy have said. If Matt just said that there will be families that would like these differently sized spaces, 2 and 3 bedroom, and they won't have a pool, but Longbridge is available. What are the other amenities in the community? And the biggest one I think of is space that works for families with kids. So if I'm over at West Post and I'm having a drink and enjoying it, I see kids out there playing in that space and they're really having a good time, and the families are there and they can keep an eye on them. And it feels livable. So spaces, maybe Center Park isn't going to happen, 2 acres of Center Park, but how can green spaces that kids can play in, how can those be created? So I think I would just sort of say, thinking about it from a livability perspective, what are other things that can be offered when the literal ones in the sector plan aren't obviously just aren't going to work. They aren't viable.
All right, Stacy, and then I think Emily online, who has joined us. So Emily, you can introduce yourself when you talk, but Stacy first. And then.
Hi, sorry, I'm not up to speed on this one. Question for you, Ben. What was this letter from Crystal City, and what were they? 2 questions. What were they looking for? And is there a proposal on the table for Center Park? I mean, that was a really big deal at one time. You couldn't build anything until Center Park got done. Has JBG or anybody proposed anything?
Well, I'd let the Crystal City folks speak to what was in their letter. I don't know, Judy, if you feel like you could.
Sort of. I think the main thing was that the theater is already existing, and was there going to be any effort to, if we can't get Cinetic back, get something else in there, because culture is non-existent basically, other than now we have a movie theater, but it doesn't really constitute a district. So that was one thing, and the other was that it was considered to be the 1800 site was particularly suited to a library. We like the idea of a two-story library so that it has a smaller footprint with half of it in the underground and the other half on the street. But the whole idea was to try to say there's some money has been set aside someplace for the library, and if it could go into an existing building, because the original deal was to put it in 1901, and that's gone away and wasn't considered viable. And I think we've also run into issues with the library's budget and who would be able to manage it and run it and all that. It's not an easy thing to do, but in an existing building that has the potential for meeting a really important community need and reusing an already existing theater, some or both of those things would be really, really important and meet a lot of the goals for the community at large and for the sector plan.
The other question was, is there a proposal for Center Park by JBG or?
Not by
developer?
JBG, because that would be this.
As a proffer or whatever.
There's no community, since there is no increase in density on the site, this is part of the adaptive reuse plan. There are no community benefits or things like that that are associated with these proposals because it's a conversion. It's, as if they release the space as office, except it's residential instead. That would be kind of the philosophical way of looking at it, compared to if they had increased the density and converted it, added additional height or something like that. That would be part of it. There is, and I was trying to look this up because I'm pretty sure it was in the adopted capital improvement plan, a mention of Central Park, and that the county will at some point revitalize Central Park as it is, not expanded. I will say, I imagine our December meeting will be a lot of CIP related discussion. My plan is to ask folks from both parks and DES to come. And so we can ask about the potential county's ability to invest at some point in the future in a revisioning of Central Park that ideally would, be matched or aligned with whatever choices the county board makes around this proposal. So Emily online. Emily, did you still want to talk? Are you able to speak? I know you are. You'd have to come up.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to make kind of an overarching comment. I'm Emily Norton. I've lived in Crystal City on and off, but mostly on since 2010. So I've experienced and seen all the redevelopment. I've largely lived in properties that are now owned by DWEC. I choose to stay here because I'm a federal employee and I like the metro access, and I didn't used to own a car, but now I have a 2-year-old, which is why I'm not there with you tonight, because I'm also a single parent and I'm not willing to pay for more childcare to come to an in-person meeting. But unfortunately, I know that makes it less effective. And I just wanted to say that, she's 2. So right now we're in a 1-bedroom unit in an older building, but at the point where I have to get a second bedroom, it's at least $1,000 more. I'm currently spending $1,600 on daycare, which is actually probably the cheapest you can get around here. And so I have, a lot of concerns about demographics of this neighborhood. And it's obviously trending towards more private sector. But the feds, especially if they're on maybe one income, are going to quickly be priced out. We're about to go into the shutdown, as someone mentioned. I luckily work for a part of an agency that keeps working and gets paid, but a lot of people are not going to have an income for however long this lasts. So I just wanted to kind of make those comments, and I apologize I can't be there, but hopefully we'll get to connect at some point at another meeting if it's not on a Monday or Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily, and thanks for joining virtually. And I will say as a note, and I'll our last agenda item, or second to last, will be the electronic meetings policy. But having a kid is a very valid excuse for attending virtually, as I have myself done previously. Pam, did I see your hand, or Jeff?
Yeah, I have a question about the property on the other side of 1901. Is it 1900 Bell? Is it? It's 1801. No, but I'm talking about the mirror to the 1901.
The Bloomberg.
Yeah, that's 1801.
That's 18. Okay. What happens with that building?
Bloomberg owns that building, and they fully occupy it. That's actually it's great to see the number of folks they have in that building. I don't know if anyone who's ever walked by that. You can see them at work, and they're back in the office big time. Yeah.
I see, Alexander. I'll just quote, because I had said I would, from the CIP. This is from the 2025 to 2034 adopted county CIP. It included a number of monies for a variety of Crystal City parks, including, it says, the second Crystal City project is phase 1 of Central Park, which will be a new 2-acre centrally located park programmed for active use and as the principal gathering space for the community, which I think is kind of reflective of the sector plan. So that's what the CIP says. Alexander.
So just a concern, particularly because we're talking about a second life, and I'm not a doctor, but I'm not sure if one of these buildings has actually died. Particularly looking at 1901, where it's still occupied, and and this is a particularly the feds being a particularly ephemeral, kind of way of looking at, some, one day, right? Like, decisions are made, and, commercial GSA is selling off a lot of its leases. A day might come under a new administration where, suddenly federal office space is in demand again. And suddenly, right, we've turned this commercial space into a park. And I think, are there alternatives that might keep, the commercial space, this is currently a building where, large amounts of people, are currently being employed in a particularly good transit-oriented space that, the alternatives would be like federal employees now, are working, considerably further outside of, Crystal City, maybe towards the suburbs. Is there, what, are the other, commercial buyers, is this still a viable commercial space that, this might be a particularly terrible time, right, in the industry, right? 100,000 people just resigned from the federal government today, right? The DRP just went into effect. But when the tides turn, or if they turn, are we getting rid of valuable commercial space in Crystal City?
Yeah, I don't really have an answer for that. I think that's always a risk for sure. I think that if and when office demand, start, so we're in our third straight year of negative net office demand, meaning that more leases are expiring than new leases are being signed. If and when we do return to positive absorption, which I think we all hope to eventually be there, there will be millions of square feet available in buildings that were built in the 2010s, 2000s, 1990s, 1980s that are just of a higher quality vintage. Outside of these two buildings, we have over 1 million square feet of vacancy within our own portfolio. And what we're trying to do is we actually are investing. We are making that bet. We were making that bet in the Parks Complex, 2011 through 2451 Crystal Drive, 5 buildings, 2.5 million square feet between them. And that's where we're putting about $50 million investing in changing those buildings to reflect the way people are working now. One of the things we've seen across our portfolio, anecdotally throughout the industry, is that one of the big changes in the way people are using office space is that employees have head down space at home, and they have space at client sites when they're going to work with clients. What is missing is large event, these types of spaces that can accommodate 25, 50, 100, on top of us. Amazon has a fantastic 700 person meeting facility. So that's something that we are investing in. And so at 2011 Crystal Drive, we spent $50 million to basically demolish the entirety of the ground floor, take out columns, and create a series of demisable rooms that accommodate 25, 50, and we have a 300 person conference room, as well as adding catering, back of house catering, as well as new F&B. So agree that we should not give up on commercial office space. We have plenty that we are still investing in and making that bet, but we do have to pick which ones we're going to make that bet on. And these are probably within our portfolio, though we would view these as the least likely to ever be successful as office buildings again.
And there's always Penn Place and Kimco.
We also have fully entitled, a lot of new construction options, which are also 101 12th we have available as well. So there's a lot of options out there for tenants who are looking.
It's a good thing Carol's not.
So we're running up against time. I can do the last two agenda items in a couple of minutes. So I'll say, is there any comment, especially if someone hasn't had a chance to comment yet, that someone wants to or would like to raise as a final comment? Pam.
Just a simple question for Matt. Are you planning on changing the exterior of either building, 1800? Because there's no illustrations in yours or the little video, and I couldn't find anything in the plans. That would be really important to us.
Yeah. So I'd say still in progress, but using 2200 as a precedent, which is where I think we'll wind up. When we started down this journey of understanding this cycle of conversions, JBG actually has a long history of conversions. This is not new to us. We converted the old EPA headquarters in DC to Lex and Leo. We did through a partner the Orinoco in Old Town Alexandria. So it's something that we've done before, but this cycle is I'd say very different in the way we're approaching it. But so when we embarked on this journey, we went and we visited both the past conversions we've done as well as a raft of other recent conversions. And in particular, we went and toured a project in Alexandria called E-Lofts, which was it's sort of near Mark Center. And in that case, the developer opted to not change the facade at all, including not adding operable windows. And when we talked with the leasing agents there, they said that was a real challenge in convincing people. Even if people never open up the window, they still want to know that they can, right? It's just that's something in our animal nature. So that's a change that we're making at 2200 Crystal Drive, is we're replacing 1/3 of in that particular case, the glass was all replaced 4 years ago. So the actual windows currently are in excellent condition, but we're still going to go out and replace 1/3 of those with operable windows, so that everyone has an operable window in their bedroom and in their living room. And then in addition, we're looking at a number of not recladding, but repainting schemes, something to try and break down its sort of more commercial appearance and give it a little bit more playfulness and welcoming nature. So I would expect the same at 1800 and 1901. The difference there is that we don't have the benefit of recently replaced glass. So I expect we will be replacing all of the glass, and then also ensuring that at least 1/3 of those are operable. And then I would expect us to also do some level of additional exterior repainting. I don't think we'll do anything as dramatic as taking the entire facade, right? You think about 1770 Crystal Drive. We took that entire facade off. It was just a concrete slab. And then we put in new mechanicals, everything. So it won't be that dramatic, but there will be some facade change.
All right. So I'm going to move us on. So two final one, a little bit of like a checkbox thing, and the other something to be thinking about. So we have electronic meetings policy we must adopt every year. We are a non-voting body, which I will get to in a second. But so that there was nothing to vote on to approve, as another commission might do. But so I am saying we are adopting it, and we will be utilizing it. That's what I'll say. We'll be utilizing the electronics meetings policy for the next year, which you're kind of required to just formally say we're going to do that. It has not changed over the last year. This is what has led to, you have to have a reason for the meetings. If we are meeting in person, we can meet in person, I think about half the time, something like that. The other two meetings, we meet 4 times a year, twice virtually, twice in person. If you're not able to meet in-person meetings, you just let us know why. And there's a number of reasons such as childcare, that allow you to do so. And that is, I believe, the meeting policy is among the materials on the CPCC agenda on our website if you'd like to review it, and you can let us know if you have any questions about that. The second thing is something I've been thinking about as I've taken on this role of chair is the fact that we do not have a voting ability. And I think, frankly, it would be challenging. We are an unusual body in that we are not necessarily representing, well, I am, but our membership is not necessarily representing themselves as individuals, but civic associations or advisory commissions or private developers or property owners or businesses, which makes taking a vote hard. I don't know, Patrick, what it would look like for you to take a vote on behalf of Amazon as part of this. I imagine it might be hard. But I do want to find, right, there's at the same time, there's not a formal way that we adopt a opinion, right? We have these conversations. The way that we do it now, we have done it in the past, and the way my approach will be, at least for the time being, is to provide, whether written, verbal, or both, to the county board for items before their consideration, a letter that represents our best, and usually would be working with Robert as vice chair to do this, best representation of what the discussion looks like in the most helpful way, and then provide it to the members as a draft just to provide any input on. They would not be signing off on it, and the letter would be coming from, and I think this is where we landed things to input, and the one that we did on the previous adaptive reuse proposals from Robert and I as chairs, but not even necessarily, I don't think Robert representing like Dweck in any official role. I would like to think about, is that the right direction? Is that the right formality? Do we formalize that in writing somehow? Is there a way to, make it more clear what the view is of this body, right? Our role is to provide input to the county board, and having a discussion amongst ourselves is great. But in order to provide some kind of input to the county board, ideally, right, for it to be impactful, right, like the planning commission votes and other commissions votes, we have, right, something in that direction. So my ask of you all is, over the next 3 months before our December meeting, to just have conversations with the bodies that you represent about how we can go in that direction, how we can, again, not necessarily require you to take a formal position or a yes or a no on any particular thing. And frankly, that's going to be hard because we're not voting to approve or disapprove proposals. That's not our role in the process. We provide analysis is probably the best thing. So I would appreciate you all just giving some thought into what that might look like and how we could move towards, I'm thinking over the next year, this is the sort of conversation it's going to take, a way of formalizing the way that we engage in our business and provide that input. So that is just something I ask everyone to consider and to talk with your associates about. And I will say along those lines, right, the way I would say how I'm feeling now, but the two big topics we discussed around the River House neighborhood and the Bell Street reuse projects, I feel at least some direction around River House and some input that we can write. And I sort of would like to work with Robert on drafting a letter based on that. I'm a little less sure we came with a clear direction on the conversion projects. It may be more of a matter of a verbal presentation and kind of sharing what was raised rather than a letter that spells out any specific direction. But to the extent that you all have thoughts that if there is a letter that represents the kind of conversation and any key takeaways, I would be happy to hear about it and maybe digesting, and Robert and I will discuss and see if there's anything that we can do that'll be helpful. But with that, I will say I would like to thank our hosts at Amazon, especially the staff who are here late in the evening to support us from a logistical and IT, everything point of view. So thank you so much. Thank you to the county staff. Thank you to you all for spending your evening with us. Our next meeting will be virtual, so we will see each other digitally. If I'm sure we all encounter each other in the meantime, and then we'll work on our next meetings for 2026. I know for our next in-person meeting, Simon's offered potentially to have their beautiful views at the top of the office tower overlooking the mall as a potential venue. So maybe we can think about that for our March meeting. But with that, I think we are concluded. So thank you.